who will be the very first speaker of our exciting event today.
Well, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, awesome. I love our first speaker. I got to meet her last summer when I went to Hotchkiss. I first met her at the Independent School Gender Project conference that some of the girls went last summer. Or to be exact, I saw her at Dollar Rental in Boston Logan Airport, just to be specific. She is a web alum. She graduated in 2005, and she went to Harvard, and where she got her Rockefeller Fellowship to go to South Africa, which the story from there she will share with us today. So I hope you enjoy, and please welcome Brittan.
Testing. Yes, it works. Okay, so I'm really happy to be here. As Jenny said, I graduated in 2005, so the campus has changed quite a bit. As I was telling Ann Stewart when I walked in, seeing Mudd Auditorium, which is now the Susan Nelson Arts Place of Awesomeness, being completely changed like that was crazy, and I started running because it was just weirding me out seeing all these new things on campus. But I am going to talk to you a little bit about the things that I've learned since I graduated and talk to you about my experience in South Africa, just like Jenny alluded to. So let's start off with this note. The media is a very, very powerful tool. And I know we're going to hear a lot about this today, but I'm just going to start us off thinking about the media overall. So with modern technology, the media really has weaved itself into our lives almost unnoticed. But unfortunately, when you talk about the media and you hear about the media, it isn't also always necessarily a great thing. We hear about how women are being exploited by the media. We hear about young girls starving themselves to blindly imitate the celebrities on TV. We also hear about the youth becoming more violent from the things that they see, or becoming more overweight because of their addictions to certain types of media. The news that we depend on to get our everyday news ends up being biased sometimes or unreliable. We also hear about social media, and when we hear about social media, we also hear about the casualties of cyberbullying. Now, on the way over here, I was actually reading an article in CNN about how the media has even changed our anger, because we can have access to news 24/7, and we can also have access to social media. When something makes us really upset, we go and we talk about it. We don't write a note to the media, to the publishers, and tell them how upset we are. We do it instantaneously. It's like 9-second anger. But unfortunately, this also means that we're spending more time being upset about bad jokes and ugly dresses at the Oscars than we are about the fact that 22% of America's children are living in poverty. Found the clicker. So, one thing I do want to say is the media is something that we can completely flip. We're not only consumers of this media, we're a lot smarter than that. We're smart enough to look away if we need to, but we're also strong enough to create the media when we want to. We can make the media. So what is the media? Who is this media monster? Well, the definition of media is the plural form of medium. Now that helps us nothing. That's not very helpful. But if you want to go deeper into the definition, it is the mass form of communication. So as the definition says, this is especially television, radio, newspapers, and the internet. But that is not all. This is the age of technology. There are so many different ways that we can consume media. This means that there are also so many different ways that we can make the media. This is something that is not necessarily a bad thing. Let's look at the definition again. The main means of mass communication. Is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? No, it's completely neutral. Communicating in itself is a very neutral thing. So the media itself is not a bad thing. The media itself is whatever we create it to be. The main means of mass communication. That means we are all empowered to make sure that the media is a positive thing for everybody. So the question is, what can you do with the media? We can learn, we can create, we can share. Learning is the consuming part that I was talking about, and I'm putting a more positive spin on it. We're going to learn from the media, but we can also create and share. Again, going back to the fact that we are not just victims to the media. We are not being victimized by what the media is telling us to do, but rather we are creators of the media. We can create a community from it. So I'm going to focus on just the last two parts, creating and sharing. There we go. So I want you all to close your eyes for just a second, and we're going to do a quick little thing. So close your eyes. Now I want you to think about something that you really care about. It can be about you, your future, your schooling, or your job for the adults in the room, or your family. It can be about what you care about, your passion, maybe a sport, a hobby, or a charity. Maybe it's a cause. You want to eradicate poverty in India or find a cure for Alzheimer's disease. Either way, it's something that's on your mind. Now think, how is this being portrayed in the media? What do people in the public know about this thing that you're thinking about? And is there something that they're forgetting? Now open your eyes. What is the picture that has been painted with what you're talking about? Maybe it's something that you see all the time in the media, but you know there's a little bit of it that people aren't talking about. Or maybe you've never seen anybody actually take a stand for what you're thinking about. Now you've seen the gaps, and now you can see exactly where it's your turn to step in. This is the point of change. This is the place where we've all seen that there's something that we care about. There's a message that we may want to tell, or some cause that we really have a lot of emotion about, or it's just something that's really personal to us. But there are a lot of things that people just haven't spoken of. And this is where we're going to step in. So as you can see, I was in South Africa. That is what this says up there. I'm going to tell you a little story about how I kind of did this, but actually it was more as an accident. So the last few years of college, I realized that I was really interested in South Africa. I realized that the apartheid had only been abolished in the early 90s, meaning racism was legal until then, and they were going through a lot of the civil rights issues that marked our country decades ago. Also, there was this generation in South Africa called the Lost Generation. This is the generation right above me that was nearly wiped out by AIDS, leaving hundreds and thousands of children orphaned by AIDS, being raised by much older women, by their grandmothers or by neighbors, often widows, or having to survive either on the streets or trying to find a place in orphanages. In fact, according to UNAIDS, there are 16 million children that have been orphaned by AIDS, and 14.8 million of those children are in sub-Saharan Africa. So this was definitely a place where I felt like maybe if I just went and talked to a few people or just did a little bit, you know, just to get out there, I could actually help a little. Well, that's exactly what I did. So given that there are problems with racism and also being raised by a much older generation, this was something I could personally relate to, but it was also something that really piqued my interest. So as Jenny said, the year after college, I went and lived in South Africa. I volunteered there with orphans and vulnerable children. Fortunately, I was given a fellowship by my university to do it, so that was great on the money end. But I really went there with my only plan being I wanted to help. I wanted to use my talents in a way that could really show people, bring awareness to the situation in South Africa. And I really, really wanted to, help. I know I've said that before, but that was basically my proposal. I want to help. I want to use the things that I love to spread awareness, and I want to help. Fortunately, Harvard took to that, and they're like, here you go, have some money. There you go. So, I will say, I really realized once I was there, I was seeing so many things. South Africa is so different from the United States, and so similar in so many ways. But the point is, most of us haven't been to South Africa. I'm guessing most of you in this room have never been to South Africa. So I realized I really just wanted to share these experiences with people. I've always been entranced by National Geographic, and that is when I realized that I really had an interest in photography. I just had a little, I had a beginning DSLR, the lowest on the market, and I just went out and took pictures. But I realized this was great because this is how I was going to share what I was seeing with my family and friends back home. Well, if you just show pictures, you kind of see a story, but you don't see the full story. And I didn't want people to take all these pictures at face value. I really wanted them to see the story behind it. So I had to write out what these stories meant, what I did that day in which I saw these children, what was happening. So I started a blog. On a personal note, a blog is a great way when you only have 1 hour a week at an internet cafe to talk to people so you don't have to answer every single email from your friends and family. But in another way, the blog became a great means of mass communication, a media, or a medium rather, and that was actually how I started getting the word out about what I was doing. And it really all started with blogging. I then realized that I really loved writing about these stories that I had. I thought it was great being able to tell people, this is what I see, and now you can live it through my very verbose stories, kind of like what I'm doing now. Saying way too many words than I needed to, but I just love sharing these things with people. Well, I also was living in the city of Pietermaritzburg, which is the capital city of KwaZulu-Natal. And while I was there was a strike going on. The city workers were not getting paid because the city had gone bankrupt. This means that the city workers, including the people who picked up the trash, they were not working. And while they were not working, one day they ended up having a protest in the street, which is actually very friendly in South Africa. They sing and they dance and march. It's a very friendly thing, but that is their protest. So I got out my camera and I took pictures of it. Because I was like, this is really interesting. And I'm sure that Pietermaritzburg, although being a capital city, is not a very well-known place in this world. And it'd be interesting to tell people what's happening, like the city has gone bankrupt. Well, I posted it onto CNN. CNN has something where you can give your own submissions. And when I did that, I did it just because I thought it was interesting. Within 24 hours, the article that I had written had over 17,000 views and was featured on their homepage. And this was just because I thought it was interesting. Then, I did it in the reverse. I wrote in a local South African newspaper my experiences of being an American in South Africa. I really wanted to bridge the cultural differences, the ignorances that I saw between both Americans and South Africans about each other's culture. And that was also really neat to have the opportunity to continue writing. And that's what I thought was really just awesome, because I was thinking, wow, look at all these mediums that I'm using that I didn't know I was ever going to use. But I just wanted to make sure that I brought awareness to both cultures, to both South Africans and to Americans, about what it meant to be living in both cultures. And just like I said, bridge some of those ignorances. But then, when I went there, I remembered that I wasn't there to tell my own story. I had mastered telling my own story, but I wasn't there to tell my own story. In fact, I was there to tell the story of these orphans and vulnerable children that I was there working with. Now, the thing about South Africa is they talk about AIDS a lot. It's on billboards, it's in publications, but when it becomes something that's part of your life, it gets personal, and you don't want to talk about it. When you see a child and you realize that they live with their neighbor, and you ask, hey, where are your parents? They'll tell you, oh, they got sick. That's the code word for they died of AIDS. Like I said, when it becomes a part of you, it gets personal. So with that, I was thinking, well, you know what, with photography, maybe I'll give these kids a way to tell these stories that are otherwise left untold. So I started this project called Mklabo Wami, which means my world in Zulu. And it was coupled with English language skills, life skill lessons, and basic photography tips that I just got from the library. And we had lessons, and I gave them a disposable camera and set them out into the world, their own world, and tried to give them a lens to talk about the things that they saw. Well, in the end, they showed me their lives. They showed me the people that were left behind to take care of them. They showed me the details that meant so much, and they showed me their losses. It was something that was very powerful, and after we went through a few rolls of film of just their faces, which I guess is what's happened when kids don't see their faces that often in photography, after we went through a few rolls of film like that, they really got into it. They really saw that this was a way that they could communicate with people and show their culture without ever having to say a word, and without ever having to shed a tear. This was a medium for them to talk about the things that were important to them. So I asked them, if you could share these photos with the world, which photos would you share? Which photos could you share with the world if you could? And we picked out photos and I helped them write bios. And then secretly, I went to the Provincial Museum and rented out the gallery space that they had there. So for 1 month, they really could show the world the photography that they had. I got them from school one day in a tiny bus, and they had their best uniforms on. They didn't know what was happening, but they knew that they were going to go to the city. As we went from the dirt roads of the township to the paved roads of the big city, you could hear their ululations as they were just so excited. We got into the museum and they ran in, and suddenly I just saw them pointing, and you can see this in the photo, to their bios and touching every single one of their pictures as if they were going to evaporate any second. They kept saying, Esmina, Esmina, which means it's me, it's me. And the best thing that I could see was that one of the parts of the exhibit, one of the walls, was actually a chalkboard. So people who saw the exhibit could come down and talk about the things that they really thought was interesting, their feelings about the exhibit, they could write it down. I was surprised when my students actually took to this chalkboard, because they started writing things like, I'm so proud of myself. And those are the types of things that could be the best thank you I've ever received. Seeing that they had not only done something that they never thought that they could do, but it actually created a positive thing. Now, the Natal Witness had come in, and the Natal Witness was the provincial newspaper, and they were covering it. So, of course, the children were so excited. They could not believe that they were going to be famous and in the provincial newspaper. But also, they realized that, like I said, they've done something that they could have only dreamed of doing before. They told their stories. But they didn't have to say a word. They didn't have to hide back tears. They just said their stories. And that was an amazing, amazing thing. The media works. In this instance, the newspaper was the medium that brought people to the museum. Photography was the medium that kept them there, that allowed these kids to share their stories. So what I want to close in saying is that you don't have to do this by yourself. You can create a community, a movement, a band. You can do this with other people and empower other people to join you in saying your message. Or you still have the power to single-handedly create a beautiful piece of music or make a mural on a wall with a message that is important to you. But the point of this is really to know that you are not just subject to consuming the media, you make the media. In fact, with all the technology at our fingertips, I think you're obligated to make the media work for you. You are empowered to create something that's going to make a positive change in everybody else's lives. When you communicate things that are important to you and people relate, their souls stir, their brains engage, and their body prepares to act. This is how change is made. This is how movements are created, and this is how the world gets better. So have a message and change the story. So once again, I ask you, what do you care about, and what are you going to do about it? Thank you.